Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast addendum with me, your host, Imperial Dane, a master of propaganda, master of addendums, and master of states of balances. And we are coming here, of course, for February 2016. Things have been happening sort of with the 5 different armies. Of course, you also got a patch finally out here where we sort of essentially had like 2 months with only a buff to the British armoured car, and that's it. We also got some commanders there, so overall things are going to be rapidly changing here after the February state of the balance, to put it mildly. But what sort of things been like here in the previous month? Well, for the British, we've seen armoured cars, Bofors and such, not much. Mortar in place in some of these. We've seen tactical sports sort of step into more prominent place. I'm seeing more players use it. They're mostly is to get a command vehicle up, set them extra mortar, and then use artillery car, whatever they can to. Otherwise, it tends to be Vanguard, strafing support, crocodiles, commandos, maybe special weapons, which actually dropped a bit then, usage, which was actually quite popular, but now sort of seems to have faded away, since, well, you kind of got the AEC now. You don't really need the anti-tank sections anymore, since those chaps will do the work quite well, or the armoured car will do the work quite well for it compared to the armoured car. That, of course, has a few issues on his own sense as well there. In that regard, the British sort of overall current state of play is structuring. I mean, we're seeing more people actually using the Comet. The Churchill has more or less vanished off there. I mean, the Comet just works quite well, in particular when they can just be aggressive. Bit unfortunate. It's not like the Churchill was bad, but I'm part of my is glad, that they are realizing the Comet's actually pretty good as well. But, perhaps they could stand, of course, to always branch out there and make themselves perhaps with it a little less obvious sort of what can be done and so on there. But sort of that's really how it's sort of going with the British. And again, they're sort of getting some nerfs. They've already made a video. Basically, Universal Carrier getting buffed, meaning it doesn't cost any fuel. I didn't get that in the last video because they hadn't added that to the patch notes. They only added that afterwards. And if it wasn't in the patch notes, I was less confident actually talking about it. So go figure. Armoured car, of course, gets a few changes there. We'll still see the armoured cars. They'll still be effective. It just won't be quite as effective. So there's a lot of change there, but we'll probably be seeing a lot more Universal Carriers to come. So that's probably something we have to look forward to, since they'll basically just call 210 manpower. They'll basically be like a Kubelwagen, except it can transport troops and be upgraded, unlike the Kubelwagen. So there are some challenges down the road there. Though, of course, artillery cover is going to get nerfed. Thank the heavens. There's going to be a little less of that down the road, which is nice. But overall, not beyond that so much of the British. I mean, they got some strategies, but overall, they are largely focused on armoured cars, mortar emplacements, going for the big stuff. Usually, again, centered around either Vanguard or tactical support. Currently, if they don't get that, they just go for rolling engineers, get a command vehicle up that way, and self-repair the emplacements. It's not too sort of much there. I imagine certainly mobile assault receives a lot of usage alongside, advanced emplacement. So, I mean, there are some things to keep in mind on how to counter. For example, advanced emplacements, probably try and avoid them, so try to strike at the British base. If you're the Orbital Commander Vest, try to hit with Pumas fast, since they sort of draw right. Don't use Flamhetzers. Flamhetzers, for some magical reason, do 0 damage to headquarters, for example, which makes no sense. So, I mean, you're all better using either armor or Pumas, so just wrecking stuff out there and trying to that way sort of, force them to sort of be more careful, try to play around them placements. As the Wehrmacht, you can do the same, but smoke, fire, all that, so it deals sort of dealing with British, sort of trying to dig in. Beyond that, your options are sort of, I think, a bit limited, but particularly as the Orbital Commanders, your options are going to be limited, sort of dealing with the really dug-in Brits, besides, just somehow trying to, hit here and there and get their base down as quickly as possible. So that's a little thing there to keep in mind, which will probably be a problem down the road, due to the Orbital Commander Vest's inherent lack of smoke, which rather limits their tactical approaches as how they can deal with these things. For the Americans, rifle companies sort of making a slight comeback. We're seeing somewhat more players use it, but overall it's largely heavy cavalry and tactical support that really takes it. A few uses infantry if they can't get tactical support for light machine guns and the likes, and you get a few people sort of going here and there. I've seen some going mechanized and a few going airborne, but airborne, which had a slight surge, has rather fallen down again, tragically. It's very much about the Pershings at the moment, and if you're the Wehrmacht, it's all about countering them with Stugs largely, and a bit of other things. As the Orbital Commander Vest, you usually try and sort of, beat them up before that, get Panthers, or as opposed to if you're completely desperate, Yak Panthers, or if you're doing well, go for a King Tiger. Overall, there's not so much else there to comment on. I mean, some, of course, are beginning to use more BARs, more bazookas, so, of course, those are also things to keep in mind, as, of course, can give you quite a headache. Armour Company has also, I think, faded out, actually. Very little use there, though, again, it had this sort of a stage of popularity, but that is vanishing rather rapidly once more. So, I mean, with the Americans, again, there's not so much as they're using Shermans quite regularly. Stewards are popular, again, captain, and perhaps a lieutenant as captain into tanks, get some Shermans out. Scots don't really see much usage still, though they are quite decent, but again, they can be a bit trickier to use. But the problem is, if you make them too good, they're going to get spammed out of there. I don't know. They could perhaps do with a small accuracy buff. Beyond that, I'm a bit concerned, since again, they can still do a lot of damage and wipe a lot of things very quickly, which is something you want to avoid. What else is there to comment on with the Americans? Well, not much really. Again, they could stand to sort of be a bit more aggressive with the lieutenant. Sometimes to just go for the captain because they can, not necessarily because they should. So I mean, that is something you can punish them for. I mean, if they go for the captain, you usually have an option there to actually be more aggressive versus the American player, since the steward isn't quite as devastating as an A half tick or a M20. Of course, it can do damage, but it's not quite say as violently damaging as other things. Then we come to the Soviets, sort of very there. Some are going heavy into mechanized, tank of tank command with C-70s, half-tracks, SN-6s, then sort of supporting with, say, IS-2s or something else there, calling-wise. Others do go for mechanized armor company. T-35s have been rather popular thanks to Guards Motor and other doctrines. For example, armored assault is seeing a bit of resurgence. And shock rifle is slowly getting back there after last month, barely seeing usage. We are seeing more go for it, but it's not quite back there yet. It's still really all about the T-3045s, for example, I feel, or otherwise T-3476s, Katyushas, and so on. Even S-35s are seeing some usage there, so that's kind of nice. Partisan doctrine is also beginning to sort of make a slight resurgence. That is something to very much keep in mind and be wary of. Burn the buildings to keep sort of other units nearby, occupy the machine guns and the like, or burn them down. Or you can also just mine the entrances with S-mines if you're the Wehrmacht, or just regular mines if you're the Oberkommando. There's a few options there, though not necessarily the best ones. But it is something there to be wary of. But again, it's still not a lot of serve players, but still very much sort of Guards, motor centric at the moment, with other sort of few doctrines there, though Lend-Lease is also a big one. Some players still like to do, you just go heavy tier 1, rely on the doctrine as much as possible, maybe augment with support weapon company, and then go for as many Shermans as they can get their grubby little hands on. That of course also stands in mind to keep track of there as the possibility for that. And if they do go for that sort of move there, try and strike them as aggressively as possible, because there's still going to be some time, usually if you spot it long enough, if early enough, they're going for it, where you can sort of usually strike at them and do a lot of damage, and then sort of, for example, invest either into a quick tier 3, if you're the Wehrmacht, or say a heavy tier 2, and then keep some packs and mines about them, in which case you might just be able to sort of really slow them down. Though obviously it's not going to be always that quite simple. As the Oberkommando S, again, you do have that harder time sort of striking towards, a faster sort of punishment. In that sense, you're either trying to get a Schwerpanzer cause out, so just push up for whatever truck you do have more quickly and so get more from it, might work. But otherwise, you're going to have to go for the quick Schwerpanzer quarters and get something that can sort of really challenge those Sherman tanks that are going to be inevitably coming down your way with some very, very nasty speed. So I think that rather covers it. Then so looking at the axes for the Wehrmacht, I mean, they've certainly been the struggling. Along the Oberkommando West at the moment, sort of check companies 2 charts, at least have been checking for the most of the month there. They're rather at the bottom. Similarly, in 2 versus 2, they're not doing well. I think it's only in 4 versus 4 where the Oberkommando West basically makes some kind of miraculous turn upwards, and everything else just sort of lags behind the Oberkommando West massively. But beyond that, I mean, the Wehrmacht's sort of like either lowest or second lowest in most of the other sort of types of matches. In 2 versus 2, for example, they're definitely the lowest. But in 1 versus 1's again low, but not super low, just around the Oberkommando West, but still lower than the Allies. I mean, overall for the Wehrmacht, you're seeing some, mostly it's, stuff like the Blitzkrieg, Lightning War, similarly, those doctrines there, mobile defense, things where you can sort of rush out a command tank. It's basically become the Stoogie. It's sort of a crutch if things don't quite go right. They'll just go for the command tank and try to buy time, but it does have sort of few elements of backfiring on them, to put it mildly. Otherwise, stuff that gives G43s. There are some who use elite troops, but it's not a lot there. Despite, people claiming the inherent overpoweredness of the Tiger Ace, for example, it doesn't really get that much sort of usage. So that's something there to keep in mind as well. Otherwise, from the Wehrmacht, I mean, strategies tend to currently focus about, snipers quickly taking up quick armoured car, then getting lots of Panzer IVs trying to a Panther, but currently Panther usage tends to sort of go not very well, partly because it's such a huge investment. By the time you got a Panther, your opponent usually has several tanks, in which case you're usually in a bit of trouble because you invested that many resources into it. Though, of course, some go for the Panzerwerfer just to provide artillery support. Some do go for Tigers, but Tiger usage at the moment is a bit sort of not quite there. Panzer gun usage tend to again also now focus heavily on Panzerschrecks. There was a slight resurgence sort of early in the month for sort of just using the actual anti-infantry work, but that seems to just fall into Panzerschrecks at the moment as people seem to unsure what to do with the light vehicles. Pack 40s have sort of fallen out of favour, though of course we'll probably see a resurgence of the 222 with the health buff. And usually, I mean, if you want to get something out of the 222, I'd usually recommend either getting 2 or 3 of them. It's really a vehicle you have to use the numbers to sort of get any decent effect out of, which does of course mean manpower wise you're paying a lot, but fuel wise not so much. It's a bit of a tricky unit there, but I think sort of a few of them can do decent damage for your opponent, as long as you keep in mind, you know, there's very apparent limitations, but it can be used for sort of quickly cutting down units and the likes. And I'm also seeing more people, by the way, using Stooks and realising they're pretty decent, though I'm still not seeing a lot of people making proper use of target weak point, which is really one of the Stooks' sort of greatest strong points, and several times also quite necessary during fights, otherwise the Stook will just be overrun. So, you know, remember, use target weak point whenever you can. For the Oberkommando West, it starts these Volksgrenadiers, Lux Rushes, Jäger spam. I mean, basically seeing Luftwaffe ground forces, scavenge, a bit of special operations, the occasional fortifications, but that's really it. Oberkommando West players really sort of just strung in. Most players also just either go for a Panzer IV or they'll try and play straight for a King Tiger. Panthers don't see so much use. Again, there might be an indicator that overall the Panther, I mean, for its cost, both Wehrmacht and Oberkommando West wise, isn't quite good. It's lacking something. Some elements sort of really make it proper, but problem is, if you sort of compare it, you know, in particular the Oberkommando West, you can't really make it too good, because then it could just be a no-brainer compared to the Panzer IV. Otherwise, you know, the suggestion might be, you know, just giving a bit of anti-infantry, but, you know, then he's, you know, quickly sort of doubles in on the Panzer IV's role, so, I don't know, maybe increases machine guns somehow, just a bit there, or perhaps some sort of special ability. But overall, the Panther needs something similar, like probably also the Sturmpanzer IV for the Wehrmacht needs something. And doctrinally, Flammhetzer needs something overall. Firesturm and some of the other doctrines we do need to look into. And for example, you also got Overwatch, which like no one uses. I maybe seen it once in someone's sort of, you know, commander setup, but in the last month, in fact 2 months, I don't think I actually seen Overwatch used except for that brief period where it was free. That's it really, which does say something about, you know, some of the state there, the Oberkommando West doctrines, which is a bit unfortunate really, and not really good, as some might point out. But overall, Oberkommando West is in a bit of a state point. I also think you need to buff the flak half track in some way. I mean, you're paying almost the same thing, for example, as a Lux, but in terms of just impact, it has none of that. And it's so easily dealt with and easily outmaneuvered. It needs something. I mean, some players can make a lot out of it, but it tends to be a small number. Similarly, the flak emplacement needs some work as well. That's one just not cutting it either. Overall, the Oberkommando West does have some issues which probably need some looking into, and I still think Battle Group headquarters should not be allowed to reinforce at the front line, and Panzerschrecks needs to be removed so long that the Kettenef at least lose its cloak, and then add in a Panzerjäger infantry unit instead. And then give the Volksgrenadiers something, you know, instead as well there. Just something. So those are some, again, small things to sort of keep in mind and consider. And overall, I think that sort of really covers the state of the balance. I mean, currently I think the Allies overall probably have a bit of an upper hand, in particular in terms of choice, though again, doesn't mean they always use it. Oberkommando West is probably the one struggling the most in choice. They're still doing something. Wehrmacht has the choice, but it seems like players are a bit paralysed as what to do with said choice. And I think they're true occupiers, so trying to make certain units which at the moment just aren't quite cost-effective work, and are overlooking other sort of, you know, excellent options. Yeah. So those are some slight things to keep in mind. Grenadier spam, though, isn't really a thing. Ostrom, though, I forgot about Ostrom, is really sort of taking back, and Ostrom probably, actually they do need a nerf in some sense, though of course the trick is how to do it. Probably just make them easier to kill somehow, so once you actually get a good flank on them, you know, they quickly die. But beyond that, it's a bit harder to say there. But I think that overall sort of covers the current state of the balance. I mean, there are some good things. It's not like we're just seeing all one-track strategies, but there are clearly some who have more options than others at the moment, and there are some doctrines that probably perform too much. And there are probably some things they're just going to see overperformance as well there with the next patch, which is unfortunate. I do think to a certain extent it's probably going to be the Oberkommando West to a certain extent will struggle a bit more compared to the Wehrmacht. I think the Wehrmacht, if properly played, will probably sort of be overall stronger versus some of the newer British elements actually. In particular, advanced emplacement doctrine is going to, I think, be a problem for the Oberkommando West, which is really going to be forced into sort of very specific patterns of having to deal with it, which means it's not going to be a fun matchup for the Oberkommando West players or for the British players. So that's another little detail there to keep in mind. So hopefully this covers it. Hopefully this, of course, sort of prepares people for might come ahead there, gives them a better idea what sort of doctrines to choose themselves, what to prepare for, what to expect, what strategies to enact, and what to prepare for. So if it did, feel free to subscribe, tell your friends, share it, like it. Remember to like. Every like, helps more people see this down the road, which is good for me. And overall, comment, point in your own feedback, your own thoughts. I mean, obviously, I'm never going to get every sort of perspective and view on this, but, never hurts to have more, so hopefully there'll be a bit there. So anyways, thank you all, and see you for another State of the Balance in a month. And of course, we'll soon have another patch, so we'll of course have to see how that goes. This is Imperial LinkedIn. Cheers, thanks for watching, hope to see you all another time. Bye!